My name is Andy McNair, and this is my presentation on the Martin Luther King dream turning into a nightmare. Um, I think when we're talking about this, one of the things that he brings up is turning old optimism into solid realism. Um, you can't just get away from old ways. It's not going to happen at the drop of a hat or a snap of a finger. Um, it's going to take a lot of work. Um, One of the things he mentions is you can murder a murderer, but you cannot murder murder, meaning that you can take away a person or an individual or a single act, but you can't take away all of the hate and all of the things that come along with it. Um, there's a lot of work that goes into that. It's not just going to be flipping a light switch and it's all over with. They don't happen overnight. You can't flip a switch. It can't just go away. The people that have been working on it are going to have to keep working on it. You can't quit. You can't give up. Um, it's going to take a lot of time. It took a long time just to get to the point where the civil rights movement was gaining traction. Once some of these laws were passed and a lot of these things were recognized and the protests made a difference, you can't stop. That's when you have to dig your feet in and you have to start working even harder. If you want change, it's going to take a lot of hard work. One of the things that he talks about is the Vietnam War. Martin Luther King was obviously opposed to the war in Asia, and after watching this video and reading these things, I completely understand his point of view. He said it stopped a decade of progress. There have been a decade of a lot of hard work and a lot of effort into gaining civil rights for African Americans. There was a lot of things that just came to a complete stop to focus on this war in Vietnam. It felt like the civil rights movement was stagnant as soon as the war in Asia started. The focus was mainly on the war in Vietnam. It was not on the civil rights movement. The entire country, the government, all the politicians, basically everybody was focused on this war and how we were paying for it and why we were there and why we were helping these people out. There was a lot of disagreement on it, whether we should be over there helping another country when we're not helping ourselves and we're not focusing on issues we have at home, especially the civil rights movement. And it also caused a loss of social perspective. We lost the ability to see what was going on in our own backyard because we were so worried about what was going on in somebody else's, which also led to, I guess, the glorification of violence. The violence was over in Vietnam. There would be talks and newspaper articles about how many Viet Cong were killed that day or how many American lives were lost. And when there were African American men and women being murdered or beaten by police, and it just kind of lost its weight. There was no way to kind of differentiate it, so it lost its power. So, which kind of leads into the legal and illegal segregation, and I'm not sure if I'm defining this correctly, but there was legal segregation in the South. There was legal separation in churches and in schools and in public places and restaurants and buses and water fountains and bathrooms. When he talks about illegal segregation in the North, he's talking about what I got from it was the fact that African Americans were not given any help. They were not given any way to better themselves or to catch up, I guess you could say. It was economic segregation. People were forced into lower income housing, into these ghetto neighborhoods, things like that, which in turn were, had lower funded schools that they were forced to go into. And it wasn't like laws that forced them into that. It was just that was all they could afford. It was all the government was offering. So segregation was illegal, but there was still segregation. And so there wasn't really the recognition of that, or the work, or um, laws put in place to help with anything with that. When we're going on to the next part of this is, if he was still alive today, he'd be 84 years old, which is completely viable. A lot of people live that long. I do believe that Dr. Martin Luther King would still be passionate about these issues, along with other issues for rights for people, such as gay marriage. I think he would be an advocate for that. The LGBT movement, I think that, just because people are different, or they choose different ways, no matter if it's their sexual orientation or the color of their skin, I think that Dr. Martin Luther King would be an advocate for all of this, and I think he would be a great person for that. I think he would still be preaching that we need to look at the realistic things that are going on. The hate is still there. The people that don't like some of these things, like gay marriage and the LGBT movement, there's a lot of people that drastically oppose these things, and can even be violent when it comes to opposing it. So I think he would be preaching that the perspective needs to be realistic. He would also be telling people that they need to be persistent. That persistence is key. You can't give up. You have to keep fighting for what you believe in. I do wish he was still alive today. I think that we lost a great human being when he was assassinated. So, all right. With that, I think that's the end of my presentation, and I appreciate your time.